Hi everyone. So we're continuing with the chapter controlling, and today we're going to start with process of controlling. If you remember the meaning of controlling which we had done, that is the standard task, actual performance. Standard task means targets or plans, actual performance means work done. We compare actual performance and standard task. We want them to be equal. They are usually not equal. We find deviation, we take causes, and then we take the right action. When we did this meaning, we actually did the process. Now that process has to be just elaborated. So when we talk about process of controlling, we are starting with setting performance standards. If I just make it out clear to you, standard task, that is plan, actual performance, that is work done. What do we say? That actual performance and standard task should be equal. Usually they are not equal. What do we find? We find deviation, and we find causes, and then we take the right action. The moment we are taking right action, we are controlling. Same thing, this is the first step, this is the second step. When we compare and then we analyze deviation, and then the last step, the taking corrective action or the right action. Right now we are going to start with setting performance standards. Now, what exactly do we mean by standards? Standards are targets, criteria, benchmark. How should they be set? They should be set in quantifiable terms, not qualifiable terms. That means they should be more in quantitative terms, not in qualitative terms. So, sorry, galat ho gaya, qualifiable nahi. So, what are standards? First thing we need to know that how we define standards. Now, standards are criteria, benchmark, targets, plans against which we measure the actual performance. These are of two types. These are quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative means number of units which you can quantitative means which you can measure, that is number of units manufactured or sold. And qualitative means the quality of work, which are not measurable and in any kind of unit terms or monetary terms. Qualitative like goodwill, or qualitative like motivation level of an employee. So when we talk about both the standards, quantitative and qualitative, we usually set up quantitative standards so that it's easier for us to measure. Like for example, if I ask you, how do I teach? You say, ma'am, you teach good. How good I teach? Good enough. What is that enough? You can't measure that enough. That is qualitative. How much have I taught you today? मैंने आपको कितना पढ़ाया? How much have I taught you today? You say, ma'am, you've taught 2 pages, measurable. How much have I taught you? Enough, or 2 pages are more or less? Now that's a difficult thing to actually measure. I have not taught you 2 kgs, 3 kgs, 2 pages, 3 pages, okay. But are these 2-3 pages enough? So again, more or less, that is again, that becomes the quality, the number of pages become the quantity. Let's come to it. Setting standard, performance standards. This is the first step in the process. Standards are criteria, they are benchmark, these are targets. These should be clear, specific, and we know it that standards are both quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative are measurable, that is for example number of units manufactured. Qualitative are difficult to measure, example motivation level of an employee. Standards should be flexible enough. Why do we want flexibility? Because we want either, when we review the standards and we want to change the standards as per the internal or external changes happening in the business environment or modification required, then we should be able to change it. That is only possible if we are able to easily revise them and they are flexible. So that revision is done after we review them. So the standard should be flexible enough to be revised either upward or downward. Standards should be flexible enough to be modified as per the internal or external environment. Standards need to be changed accordingly. This is what standard is according to controlling, or when we try to set the standards, this is what we have to keep in mind. Next point comes is measurement of actual performance. Now what is actual performance? Like I've given you standard task, standard is standard task, that is plan, actual performance is work done. Now this step includes what? Actual performance means work done, what you're performing, how it is to be evaluated, who will evaluate. See, if your superior has to evaluate, he's going to give a report. On the basis of that report, you're going to be appraised, and on the basis of that, you're going to get your promotion. So that performance appraisal also works every day. Because if we've set some number of units for you to manufacture, and if you're not able to accomplish that target, that means your actual performance is not equal to the standards. So this step involves measuring actual performance of various individuals and groups. We have individuals as well as groups out here. Performance should be measured in an objective and reliable manner. There should be no partiality, and it should be very, very accurate. It should be very, very honest way of evaluating the performance, because people are actually promoted on this basis. There are several techniques for measuring performance. So what are the techniques for measuring performance? First is personal observation. You observe somebody. See, when an examination is going on, what do you do? What does the teacher do? The teacher observes every student writing their exam. So personal observation is there. Similarly, a supervisor personally observes people when they are manufacturing. So personal observation. Second, sample checking. Randomly we pick up any sample and we check, and if it is according to the standard, good enough. If it is not, then we tell them to correct the deviation. So sample checking. Next is performance report. This is given by the superior, and it is about the subordinate. It is given for the purpose of evaluation, the evaluation of current performance, and this is basically called performance appraisal, on the basis of which you are promoted. I am telling this continuously because this is what measurement of performance talks about. Measurement should be done after the task is completed in the same as the same standards are set. In the same manner as the standards are set, you should measure the performance. Of course, yes, if you are talking about sales, so the unit should be manufactured, ready for sale, and then you measure the performance, how many units have been sold. When we are talking about production, producing, then you should check according to the production part of it. So it should be in the same manner how you're trying to, how you've set the targets. Also, if you set a target for production, say suppose 100 units per day, and you just evaluate the performance as per the salary earned by that person or the wage earned by that person as per the number of units produced, that's not the right criteria. The bases are not the same. Bases have to be very, very clear and same. You can't evaluate the standard salary on the basis of number of units produced by a person, because your standard was something else. So number of unit produced should be 100. If you've decided 10 rupees as a salary, that is going to be like that. If the person produces 80 units, you cannot just simply reduce proportionately the salary and say now we are going to give as per the salary as per deficit number of units. Salary will remain, not salary, the wage will remain the same, and accordingly the wage will be given. Now, measurement when done for evaluating company's performance, it involves preparation of report by superior. So superior prepares a report, and financial analysis. Here we are talking about the ratios which you have in your accountancy, like gross profit ratio, net profit ratio, solvency ratio. So many ratios are there. Measurement of an individual is done through performance appraisal. So this is what when we talk about measurement of performance. Next is comparing actual performance with standard task. Exactly what we have just done here. After measuring the performance, it is necessary to compare actual performance, that is work done, with standard task. So we are comparing actual performance with standard task. It should be equal. Usually it is not equal. Standard task and actual performance should be equal. They are not equal. So whenever they are not equal, what do we find? We find deviation. Deviations are mistakes which you do. Now, what are the causes of mistakes that you have to find out? The causes could be that there was some untrained worker, or the resources were not available, or there was a power cut, or somehow there was a machinery breakdown. Anything can be the reason. The standards here should be set in quantitative terms, of course, so that it's easier for you to measure. For example, if it is easier to measure number of units produced by a worker for a week, particular 15, maybe 15 days, or a month, whichever way, comparison has to be done. So next we come to the fourth step of process of control, that is analyzing deviation. What are deviations? When actual performance is not equal to standard task, it leads to deviation. If deviations are within limit, we ignore or we avoid them. But if they are occurring again and again, and if they are repetitive in nature and they lead to some kind of problem in the organization, then immediate management attention is required. So for that purpose, for measuring a deviation, there are two ways. One is critical point control and the other is management by exception. Now, critical point control talks about the key result area, those points which are critical to the success of the organization, whereas management by exception talks about concentrating on important matters by the superior and letting the unimportant matters which are not of real value to the superior to be dealt by the subordinate, because that's what we do the delegation for. So let's read through analyzing deviation. Deviations when actual performance is not equal to standard task, that is actual performance is not equal to standard task, it is important to know the acceptable range of deviations. This is the definition for deviations. Now, it is important to know acceptable range of deviation. If deviation are within limit, if they are okay, then we ignore them. If they are major, repetitive in nature, immediate attention is required. There are two ways of analyzing deviation. First is critical point control and the next one is management by exception. Management can analyze deviation on the basis of above two criteria. So these are the two criteria through which management can analyze deviation, starting with critical point control. It's not easy to keep check on each and every activity in the organization. To keep a check on each and every activity in organization, we can say. So what do? Right? An ideal control technique should be concentration on key aspects. So सबसे अच्छा तरीका क्या है? What is the best way to concentrate on the checking of deviation? Is to look in for the key aspects. See, whatever I am encircling out here, these are all your keywords. In all the chapters which we have done in all the videos, I have encircled some words, those are keywords. If a chapter can have a keyword, similarly an organization needs to have some kind of key work, not word, key work. That key work or key area is critical to the success of the organization. Like your keywords are important for the answer, key result area are critical to the success of the organization. So KRA means key result areas which are critical to the success of organization, like for example increase in labor cost by 5% and increase in postal cost by 15%. So how do we explain this example? Suppose your labor cost, okay, per day is 1,000 rupees, 10,000 let's suppose, 1,000 is very less, okay, and if it increases by 5% every day, okay, that makes it 500 rupees, right? And if you have 25 working days, 25 into 500 makes it 125, right? This is the labor cost. Whereas postal cost, let's suppose postal cost is 100 rupees per week, right? If it increases, it will increase by 100 into 15%, okay, that is rupees 15. That means 400 is the total cost for the whole month. 400 is the total cost for the whole month, and you add up 60 rupees more, 460. Now, which is more critical? Of course, the labor cost is more critical. So, critical point control. Next comes management by exception. Management by exception means if you try to control everything, you may end up controlling nothing. You know, if a supervisor checks on every bit of work which is being done, every single person, the supervisor will get tired in a day or two, and third day he'll not be able to concentrate on his work, and the workers will get fed up of him because he's too nagging or naggy about everything which is being done in the organization, too critical about everything which is being done in the organization. So what you need to do is you need to just set some criteria that okay, this much of deviation can happen every day or in a once in a week or twice in a week. This is acceptable range. Beyond this, immediate action will be taken and nobody will be spared. People usually try to avoid deviation In case if it happens sometime because of some reason, there should be a minimum plan set up to accept that minimum range of deviation. Now, if you try to control everything, you may end up controlling nothing. This is what it means, and this statement usually come as board question also. Only significant deviation should be brought to the notice of management. If the organization plans to ignore 2% deviation in labor cost, the management may decide not to notice. It's okay. But if deviation increases to 5 to 8%, then immediate attention is needed. Moreover, managers should always concentrate on important matters and let the unimportant matters be dealt by the subordinate. This is what management by exception or control by exception means. So these are the two ways of analyzing deviation. We concentrate more on increasing of deviation after 2%. 2% or 1% is not a criteria to be very once in a week, that also maybe 4 times in a month, that's okay. But they shouldn't be there. That much of deviation should also not be there. But you can't expect everybody to perform 100%. All workers are not same. There can be fatigue issues, there can be any breakdown issues. So that kind of consideration has to be kept in mind. Targets are to be met by the end of the month. Targets should be met, and the deviations should be covered up for, but then they should not be hustle bustle about it to take immediate action. Last step in the process of controlling comes out as taking corrective action. Now this is the final step. Now you have to take corrective action. And how do you take corrective action? This is the final step in the process of controlling. If deviations are small, we've already talked about it, then leave them as it is. You don't have to do anything about them. Like 1% deviation in a month, leave them. You've set a plan for 2%, you can leave. 1%, you can leave. Once in a month, leave them all together. If the deviations are huge, occur continuously, they will hamper your goodwill, so leading to huge losses in terms of money and goodwill, or as well as you can write reputation also in real terms, then immediate corrective action is required. Example, deviation is obsolete machinery. You know that there is going to be a breakdown in time with the obsolete machinery. Modification or modernization is required. In case deviation cannot be corrected through managerial action, then upward or downward revision is required. If you have set high standards, the standards are more, downward revision. If you have set less standards, then upward revision is required. I have already discussed upward and downward revision, still I will discuss it again. Suppose the standard task is 100 units and all the workers are manufacturing 80 units. In that case, the standards set are very high, pull them down to 80. In case you've set 100 as standard task, everyone is performing 120 units, that means you've set lower standards, pull them up to 120. So upward or downward revision can be done. That's all about the process of controlling. Next, so once we've finished off with the process, there's very important topic which has to be dealt with. The topic is advantages of critical point control and management by exception. So after analyzing deviation on these two bases, what we need to know is what are the advantages, why we actually analyze deviation on these two bases. First is either of the bases used, either of the ways used, it saves time and efforts of managers as they deal with significant deviation. So KRA also it talks about significant deviation, and management by exception or control by exception also talks about concentrating on important matters. It focuses managerial attention on important areas there, and thus there is better utilization of managerial talent because the superior or the supervisor or the manager is concentrating on important tasks and the other work is shared with the subordinate. So for subordinate, that task is more important, for superior the other task is important. So everybody, when they perform their own respective task, it becomes better, everybody's potential is tapped out. The routine problems are left to the subordinates in management by exception, so it facilitates delegation of authority and increases morale of employees. How? Superior concentrate on important matters as per his post or his status, and subordinate works with something new that increases his morale and motivation to work in the organization. So delegation or sharing of work makes things very, very easy. Identifies critical problems which need timely action to keep the organization on right track. So there is not much need to go here and there, there and then, and you are on the right track to know that yes, these are the deviation and these need immediate attention and these need to be solved immediately. Next we'll do is limitations of controlling. So This is the last topic, limitation of controlling. What are the limitations of controlling? There are 4 limitations of controlling. First is difficulty in setting quantitative standards. Limitations have been taken after the process, because in process I explained you that the standards are of 2 types, quantitative and qualitative. Which are easier to set? The quantitative. Which are not easier to set? Qualitative. So when you will have difficulty in setting quantitative standards, control is not possible. With qualitative, it is already not possible, and with quantitative, not being able to set it properly will be much more difficult a task. So let's read through. When standards cannot be defined in quantitative terms of control, the measurement of standard task and actual performance becomes difficult. Yes, you cannot measure standard task and actual performance. It will be difficult to measure. Here control system loses its effectiveness, so it will become useless, effective nahi rahega, it will not be effective. This means qualitative standards are difficult to analyze as it is. What does it mean? As it is, qualitative standards are difficult to analyze. Like for example, employee morale and job satisfaction, and along with that you're not able to analyze the quantitative standards also, then your control is useless. Second is resistance from employees. Nobody likes to be controlled. Do you like to be controlled by your mom? When she tells you, where are you going? Where are you coming from? Who's this friend you're talking to? What are you doing on the phone throughout the day? You immediately get hassled. In school, under CCTV, you get hassled. Similar happens with employees. Control is often resisted, not disliked by employees. They see it as a restriction on their freedom, curbing of the freedom. For example, employees might object when they are kept under a strict watch with the help of CCTVs. And nowadays it's very important, because sometimes employees tend to do things which are not required, so it's very important to keep them under CCTV vigilance, but they don't like it. It is a resistance from people, so that is a reason why people do not like control. Little control on external factors. Now, there are 2 types of factors, internal and external. Internal is within the organization, external is outside the organization. Internal means people who are working within the organization, you can control them, you can check them. They don't like, but still supervisors are there. External factors are people, social, economic, political, legal, technological, competitors, customers, government policy, technological factors. So many things are there. So an organization in general cannot control external factors like people, government policies, competitors, example GST for business communication, for business community. That was a big problem for business community when GST was imposed, and then demonetization when it happened, that was also a big problem for the business community. Next we come to is controlling is a costly affair. See, sometimes installing a controlling system becomes a very humongous task for the organization, and the benefit derived from that particular task may not be equal to the cost put in. That time controlling becomes a costly affair. Small organizations also cannot afford installing a good control system, so that also poses a threat, and too much of personal observation becomes difficult to carry on. Control is costly affair as it involves expenditure. How it involves expenditure? It involves a lot of time and efforts. Expenditures in terms of installing a control system. Sometimes cost of installing is more than benefits derived from it, so it is more expensive. Moreover, a small organization may not be able to install. So small organization faces the threat of not be able to install a good controlling system. Apart from that, there are some terms which I would like to bring to the notice of the students. There is this term called deviation. Deviation means when actual performance is not equal to standard task. Under deviation, there is positive deviation, that is when actual performance is more than standard task. Negative deviation, when it is actual performance is less than standard task. Like suppose you have standard task 100 units and you are manufacturing 120. So that plus 20 is positive deviation. Negative deviation is when standard task are 100 and you are manufacturing 80 units. So minus 20 is your negative deviation. Then feedback. Feedback in control means response to what is happening in the organization, to know deviation or whatever is happening in the organization, so that you can take steps to control the situation. Is feedback in control. KRA is key result area which are critical to the success of the organization. This is the definition. Management by exception means, or control by exception, we can also write this as the Control by exception. It means manager should concentrate on important matters and let unimportant matters be dealt by subordinate. That is, if you try to control everything, you may end up controlling nothing. So it's better to delegate work or share work. Sample checking. In a large organization, certain pieces are checked randomly for quality purpose. It is called sample checking. This is in the process of controlling, second step. So all these are in the steps of or process of controlling, which you need to know in general about controlling. With this, we end up chapter controlling. I hope you enjoyed learning experience. Enjoy yourself, and this actually finishes off your book 1. So, ta-da!